Okay, so hello everybody, and welcome to our webinar for today. So this is all about how brands learn, survive and grow in a crisis. We'd always planned to host an event as part of Leeds Digital Festival. I think if we go back a month or two ago, guys, we were talking a lot about potentially doing one around the secret of creativity. I think given recent events, as a team, as a whole agency, indeed, we've been sharing lots of actionable, useful information on all aspects of marketing to try and help guide brands through these challenging times. So we've put the original topic on the back burner. We'll probably do that again in the future. And we've had a bit of a change of topic, and what we try to do is really just bring everything together that we've been sharing over the past month, everything that we've been discussing as a team, observing as a team, debating. So hopefully you'll find today's webinar really topical, but also insightful and practical. You can take away some tips that you can start to apply to your own worlds. So, one second. Okay, and then just a few introductions. So today's webinar is brought to you by Mediaworks Leeds. So we're a team that specifically focuses on brand strategy, experience, creative and content services. I'm Gill Ball. I'm managing partner for Mediaworks Leeds. I'm joined by Paul Mallett, who's my fellow managing partner. We have Becca Tredgett, who is our head of strategic planning, and we also have Andrew Brown, our creative strategy director. Say hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
So, I'm confident that we can bring you lots of interesting insights and opinions, but we were also keen to bring you the viewpoint of a real business owner today. So I'm very pleased to say that we've been joined by Ali Dowsing Reynolds, who is a client of Mediaworks. Ali is co-founder and director of brand and marketing at Dowsing and Reynolds, which is a luxury home decor boutique. They've got real world shops, but also a fantastic e-commerce presence. So there's lots that we can learn from Ali and how as a business they've been adapting to this crisis that we find ourselves in at the moment.
Hey.
So there's three parts to the conversation today. We're going to be talking to you about advertising, experience and creative. For each section, we'll share some observations and then we'll follow that with some questions and discussion around each of these topics. So if you've got any questions, just add them to the Q&A. We'll try and cover as many of those that we can. If we don't get through them all, I suppose it depends how much discussion we get into, how much debate. I will try personally to follow up with as many people as possible after today, just to see if you've got any burning questions that we didn't manage to answer, or indeed if you just, if you want to have a specific conversation about something, we're here to try and help in any way that we can. So without no further ado, I will pass over to Becca, who's going to start with advertising.
Hi, so I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the landscape of advertising at the moment, where we think the opportunities are, where we think the challenges are. So to set the scene, going on to the first slide, I think, seamless. We know it's a really, really nerve-wracking time for businesses at the moment. I think it's really, really scary, especially, I think talking to clients as well, and where you should be putting your money at the moment, and how do you make those decisions, and how do you know you're doing the right thing? And I think what we wanted to talk to you particularly about was brand advertising, because we know at the moment an initial knee-jerk decision might be, actually, I want to invest all of my money into promotions and really driving that at the moment. It might be to completely go dark and cut spend completely. But what we wanted to do was reflect on the last recession and have a look at what happened with brand advertising during that time. So you can see up on the screen, we've got a chart which looks at the Brand Z top brands portfolio. Brand Z are a company that measure essentially the equity in brands. So it looks at commercials, how much money they're making, but actually brand metrics as well. So things like salience and perceptions. And so you can see that there. I can't get close enough to the screen, but I believe that's a green line. And then it is looking at the S&P 500, which is very much a dipstick of the average performing stocks, or average performing stocks in the market, which is the red line. I'm getting some nods, so I presume that's the red line. And what you can see when the last recession happened was, of course, all of the stocks dipped and all of the brands dipped. But what you can actually see is those that had the stronger brand equity bounced back a lot better in recovery. So you can see that there's a real opportunity there that says that, you know, if you invest and you invest in that long-term planning and that long-term brand marketing, actually you put yourself in a better position for recovery. And I think to massively caveat, because I know there's a huge amount of talk in the industry at the moment about this, this is about, you know, we understand that marketing is kind of one facet of your business, and actually your brand might not be in a position to do that, and it's really about getting cash in quickly, and that might be that you need to double down on promotions, or it might be actually you need to completely stop marketing budgets, you know, completely and cut the spend fully. But what we're saying is if you are in a position that you can consider investing in brand and long-term brand marketing, it's really something that can put you in good stead. And the next slide looks at a bit of the opportunity of this. So we know that in marketing, generally what we see is a big correlation between share of voice, so that's kind of typically paid ad spend, and share of market. And what we know that is if you cut back on that ad spend and that share of voice, what you tend to see is you'll lose market share. And we saw a lot of brands in the last recession doing this, and actually it was really, really hard and a lot more expensive to claw their way back to the position they were in. So the opportunity for growth here is that a lot of competitors will be doing this. So what you can do with your brand is actually think about investing more money and taking advantage of those lower costs. There's going to be less competition, and it basically puts yourself in a better position for recovery, and you'll get that higher share of market because your share of voice is a better cost. And I was looking at ThinkBox earlier today, that is kind of a thought leader around above the line in TV advertising. They're actually saying that the cost for TV advertising at the moment is really, really low. So there's a massive opportunity for you to really think about developing your brand. Our next slide is looking at a little study from Richard Shotton. Richard Shotton is one of Ali and mine, I can see her smiling, Ali and mine's favourite marketers. He very much looks at behavioural science, and he's got a great book called The Choice Factory, which looks at 25 behavioural biases and how they can impact marketing. I would definitely recommend you read it, and this is not a hashtag ad. It is just very much a book that I think is really great. But one of the points that he talks about, and he's actually brought it up in some industry news at the moment, is that he's found that when consumers have a kind of something that interrupts their life, or a big life event, he uses the examples of things like having a baby or going through a divorce. That disruption to consistency makes them more likely to try new brands. And some of the studies he's run have found that actually it can be up to 2.5 times as much that you're more likely to try a new brand. And I mean, that's great anyway to use as a marketer, but actually what you end up doing is having to segment quite a lot, because obviously not everyone's getting divorced at the same time, not everyone's having a baby at the same time. But actually at the moment, everyone is going through this. Everyone is having this life-changing event at exactly the same time. So that's a really great opportunity for marketers to think about, you know, how you can go after your competitors' audience. And we know a lot of brands that we work with will have a very strong penetration strategy, but actually thinking about, right, this is a time where your audience could be swapping out and they could be going to another competitor or another brand. So really thinking about protecting those as well. And then looking at another slide around opportunity. Again, we've looked back at the last financial crash, and, you know, we saw a lot of sectors actually boomed after that. We saw that DIY, discount brands did really well, especially DIY, because people wanted to, you know, they didn't have the money to get people to do it for them, so they wanted to do it themselves. Discount brands, obviously people were concerned about the money they were spending, and also brands like Hasbro and Lego saw big increases in market share as well. And the thing that all of those brands really have in common is it's about making life easier and better for consumers. So what we'd really say is really think about how you can be helpful to your audience and communicate this strongly through your brand and advertising.
And the data that you've got on the screen there, Becca, is
yep, just ignoring the data, sorry. This is some search behaviour from a provider called CRITICA, who's looking, this was from the week ending 12th of April, so that's looking at what kind of categories are over-indexing and under-indexing in industry. And you can see there that things like outdoor furniture, outdoor seating, gaming chairs really over-indexed for people searching for. So it can kind of give you a suggestion that there are absolutely sectors that are booming that we can take advantage of.
And I think we see that we I think the spirit of all of this is that we know that there are some sectors that are doing very well from at the moment, and some businesses and some industries that are having a very perilous time. So we're interested in all of that, and when we do look at the data about whether it's from a programmatic network like CRITICA, or we're looking at Google Trends data and that kind of thing, the behaviours are shifting quite quickly. And you had even things like, we know that pasta pretty much sold out everywhere, and the actual demand for pasta has gone down, but has been replaced by a huge demand for chocolate, which was really interesting. So once people have sorted out their basic carbs, they moved on to the luxury carbs pretty soon after. So I guess if we just move on and just talk around some of the points from that.
Yeah, I think I was just going to ask that question really about the fact that we will see this crash, but then we will see a boom in certain sectors. You shared some data there, but can we talk a little bit more about any particular sectors that you think are going to boom as a result of this? And we might be seeing some of that now. We're all sitting in our homes, our gardens a lot more. But also when we come out the other side of this, can you see any sort of sectors that are really going to boom as a result of this crisis?
Yeah. I was having a think, and I was thinking that I kind of think there's going to be a lot of things, like I can imagine subscription boxes will still, it's about getting people into that behaviour. And even though that's not a sector, and I know that's kind of like a type of buying for people, I can imagine that continuing to boom, and actually those kind of shifts in how people are selling to their consumers. So that was kind of my thought on it when I was thinking about specifics. So maybe not necessarily what industries, but how people are selling.
There's some really interesting stuff I was reading about. So we all know about home deliveries and that kind of thing being in huge growth and by necessity. But actually, I was reading about a milk delivery company, and actually they'd already at Christmas experienced a doubling of growth because of the kind of anti-plastic, so the environmental movement. So people had already started to shift towards more sustainable ways of getting some products delivered, and then they'd seen that, I think it was like a 7 or 8 times increase as a result of the COVID-19. So I think that there's a lot of different things here, and when we're coming out of COVID-19, that we will start going back to the environmental side of things as well. So it's almost like some of the brands and businesses that can see an opportunity within both areas are going to do quite well. And I think to Becca's point about Richard Shotton and times of upheaval, meaning that people reappraise brands, I mean, we're definitely seeing across the board the companies that have online presence have seen a huge increase in, a lot of people have seen a huge increase in traffic levels, but not so much necessarily being mirrored in buying behaviour. So that phenomenon of people having time and using that time to look at new products, look at new brands, it's definitely something that we're seeing.
I think they're going to start to look after themselves a little bit more as well, because we've always maybe felt a little bit guilty about taking the time to look after ourselves. But I saw a really good quote the other day from Trends Forecaster. She's a Goody Herder from Eclectic Trends, and she says the meaning of self-sufficiency, self-care, self-indulgence, self-healing, self-education, all starting with the prefix self, will change. You'll no longer be ashamed about looking after yourself. This is going to help you to take care of your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health. I know I've got a Peloton bike because I want to get a little bit fitter from this, but everything from kind of investing in self-education, from I think masterclass.com has seen a spike in people signing up to do their education classes as well. So I think looking outside at the environment, like Paul says, but also looking inside at yourself as well. I think brands that are operating in that kind of sector are going to do well.
Absolutely. I think we're talking there a lot about sort of sectors that are going to do well off the back of this, and like I say, people are taking care of their houses, their gardens more, there's more self-care going on. We do have an interesting question here about You know, do you think there's any sectors that will struggle as a result of this, because, you know, people have had to really adapt and get used to a new way of life? So, for example, gyms, you know, people are going out there and exercising themselves, you know, for free. They're going on runs, cycling a lot more. So, yeah, is there any particular sectors do you think are going to struggle off the back of this?
I saw some really interesting, YouGov have just released some data, I think it was yesterday, and they were asking people, do they think they're going to be wary of going to certain places in the future? And I know it's claimed data, but a lot of people are still saying that even once we're allowed to go back to places like, they were talking about restaurants, and I think it was busy shopping centres and things like that, would you still be willing to do that? And I was actually surprised, because I thought the answer would be like, yeah, get me in that bar, get me in that restaurant. But a lot of people were saying, actually, I'm still going to be super wary. So I think that's going to be really interesting. And I think if you kind of look...
If we find a vaccine, then we'll be fine. I think that will mean that, you know, people like Mark Ritson are thinking that we're going to come out of this and go pretty much straight back to normal. But I think a lot depends on whether we find a vaccine. If we find a vaccine... We'll have nothing.
Yeah, completely. And I think if you look at China as well, just the kind of behaviour there, and I guess because there hasn't been a vaccine found there still, I know they're saying that some sectors are really struggling, and restaurants are really, really struggling to recover because people aren't going because they're still worried. So I think, yeah, like you say, Ali, it really does kind of hang in the vaccine, really.
And I think there's some people that will behave like that, but then you also see that the Florida beach that opened up, that everyone was straight back on there. There was no social distancing going on.
Just before we move on to the next part of what we want to discuss, it's just a question from Beth. Hi, Beth. And do we think... And hi, Emily, for the first question. Do we think that people want to support more independent and local businesses? For sure, because you know, everybody has been opened up to what have had their eyes open to what is on their doorstep. So by necessity, people's behaviours will change. And I'd be very surprised if a lot of these behaviours don't stick. That is the $1 million question in marketing at the moment, is how do things really significantly change? And I think the history tells you that things do change. You know, I wasn't around for the 2 world wars, but Britain changed significantly in its attitudes to many, many different things, from sex, gender politics, women's rights, workers' rights, all these kind of things, really changed by necessity after the war. And there's no reason to think that this very dramatic shock that we've been through won't change things. So I think for sure local and independents will really benefit from this, because the biggest single change is that many of us were very used to the world of e-commerce and having deliveries, but hey, guess what? All the people that didn't have suddenly got used to it, and a lot of that is to do with being local. So we'll see. So do you think we should move on to the next topic, Jill?
It's like you do my timekeeping.
Well,
I was going to end with an interesting question, but yeah, you're right. Okay, let's keep moving because we'll end up squeezing the next sections. Okay, so is this because this is your section, Paul? Over to Paul.
Yeah.
So we're going to now talk about...
I was just going to ask, before we did move on, just going back earlier to the point of people browsing but not buying online, and just related a little bit to Andrew Crowther's question, which is about China seeing a demand for luxury goods dropping and not recovering. Ali, do you think that's because people feel like they shouldn't be buying things that aren't necessities at the moment?
A little bit. I think there's a little bit of, money worries about, there is a recession coming up after this. What's my money going to be like afterwards? So I think people are definitely thinking twice about that, definitely.
Okay.
Let's move on, and we'll take the other question that we've got here at the end of this one, because I think it will fit a little bit better.
Yeah, agree. Okay, so we're going to talk now, or Paul's going to talk now about the importance of the whole experience, and again, we'll have some discussion at the end of this. Yeah.
So these areas have come out of all these webinars and webcasts that we've been doing, and really listening to people. So clearly that first bit about do we continue advertising and what the hell's going on was one bit, and then I think that this whole bit about the experience is a really critical area. So if you just go to the next slide. What we've, what became very apparent very early on in this is that pretty much every facet of how you operate, how you speak to your customers, your consumers, will speak volumes about your brand, your authenticity, and the trust that people are putting into you. And you know, certainly with some of the e-commerce players, you know, and I know that talking to Ali, you know, reassuring your customers that you're taking care of your staff while you continue trading was a really important point. Because people didn't want to feel like they're buying from someone that was being exploitative. But then we've had all of these things emerging around longer returns policies, like we can see on ASOS, and you know, even how we're getting onto managing delivery. But also, I think within this, the considerations about whether to go into promotion, whether to run sales, whether to extend sales. But I think the critical thing is just making sure that there has never been a time where people are paying as much attention to your content, to your website, to your user experience, because people have got more time on their hands. And we know that the amount of time that people spend online is going up, the amount of different brands they're looking at is going up, the dwell times on websites are going up. So all of this is evidenced by the data. So really being you know, on point about your experience and you know, your copy and the way that you're communicating is really important. So we've gone to the next one. And I think that Amazon clearly have come, you know, in the line of fire for lots and lots of different reasons, from how they're treating their staff to, you know, but they've already got a monopoly. Surely this is going to be the death of everybody else because Amazon will just rule. Through into starting to see Amazon kind of slightly unraveling around their delivery times, and them saying, you know, that's because they're focusing on essential supplies, but it might be actually that a lot of their smaller companies that sell through Amazon are struggling. But I actually think that Amazon, in spite of all of this, have really bossed this. And they, you know, they've got an amazing FAQ on their website, but they sent an email to all of their, well, I got one because I presume all customers, but it may be just Amazon Prime, where they went through meticulously every single element of how they're operating within COVID-19, from their staff, their drivers, the warehouse staff, you know, absolutely everything. And through to how they're working with government agencies and all of this kind of thing. So I think that, you know, by doing that, they set expectations, and, you know, normally if Amazon's delivery times had plummeted, you would see people leaving in droves. But actually, I think Amazon will come through this having communicated really quite well.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting to see what they've been doing in terms of selling their books as well. So very clearly, when you go to search for a book on Amazon at the moment, they are really pushing the Kindle version of the book, and it's actually quite hard to select the paperback or the hardback version.
Yeah, which is brilliant. So adapting the, you know, the actual product offering to suit the times is great. The next one, in terms of the experience, I think, you know, social media is really important, and I think that the brands that have done this well have recognised that, again, people have got time on their hands. People are thinking about things, considering things, pondering things. And I just kind of pulled this example from Mr. Porter, who, you know, because in the run-up to doing this webinar, we did have a number of questions, and a lot of it was about being tactful and, you know, is there a right way or a wrong way to communicate? Well, you know, the right way to communicate is what's right for your audience. And I think that this example from Mr. Porter, you know, you can't jump on a plane, but you can pick up a good book. These are the escapist novels returning to, is very on brand. Actually, a good example of a brand being helpful. There's some good books in there. Mr. Porter and Netta Porter as a group as a whole do content marketing brilliantly. But, you know, they could have tried to sell me a pair of shorts, which is what everyone else is doing. But instead, they did actually talk to me about books and did some messaging that really makes me feel good about them as a brand.
Did you buy any shorts?
I've got plenty of shorts, Andrew.
Not far off a click to buy some more shorts.
Yeah. Shorts are definitely up. If you and I think that, you know, the whole focus around user experience, we've all been seeing more and more of this over the last couple of weeks about websites putting you into queues. Now, again, we know there's a very practical reason for this around either throttling the order numbers or trying to manage the overall traffic within the website. But we will look back, and whoever the company is that set this up as a service did miss an opportunity. If I'm going to sit somewhere for an hour waiting to get into the B&Q website, B&Q have got loads of really good content and stuff that would be really helpful at this time. How-to guides, that kind of stuff. Not necessarily selling you anything, but I think this is probably one of the worst pieces of user experience that you could ever see. I mean, it's full of missed opportunities, and I think it's kind of like the opposite of what Amazon's done. Amazon have been helpful and kept the shop open, and I don't think that I believe that B&Q's back end can't cope with what they're trying to do. So I think in the future, and if we go into any more situations like this, these big retailers will have learned quite a few lessons. And I think they're just go to the next slide, Jill. And again, looking at other retailers, I think that the ability to virtualize in a user experience has been really important. This is just an example of a local interiors company who in Sunnybank Mills in Farsley. They do a lot of advertising. And I think it was in the first week of lockdown, all the interiors companies, as per usual, were advertising in the Yorkshire Post on Saturday. Great read if you've never read it. These were the only guys that actually acknowledged that COVID-19 had happened, and they said, come and check out our virtual showroom. And guess what? Their virtual showroom is actually really good. They have 3D LiDAR scan their whole room, and you can go around and it's all high res and absolutely brilliant. So the ability to virtualize your business and virtualize your experience is really important. And then just the last one here. Obviously, we've seen, and we were talking about this before about local companies, but the people going into e-commerce and delivery has been fabulous. And we're very blessed to live in a world where we're surrounded by breweries, and the breweries have kind of, along with some of the restaurants, have led the way in terms of not only virtualizing their business, but really getting on top of how to do e-commerce. And I think for me, what's been really interesting, and that you've heard this from a few different sectors as they've suddenly had to cope with this world, is they could all do online ordering. They could all set up WooCommerce or Shopify or whatever in terms of putting an e-commerce front end onto their website, which has been great. But actually, it's things like how do you organize deliveries that have been really difficult. And I think that it's now starting to think as we go and think about the future, what other services can we be offering, and if we're going to equip and advise brands, and big or small, on how to do things, is to not just think about the front end and the user experience at that end, but to think about the back end and deliveries. And I put Ossett Brewery up there because now if you live in LS7, you get your delivery on a Tuesday, but if you're in LS11, you get it on a Thursday. So they found a really practical way to deal with. They didn't really have a clue how to manage a really complicated delivery network. So it's a good solution.
Okay, so I think just to kick off the discussion, I suppose if we can just talk a little bit more about how businesses have had to, there's been a lot of businesses that have completely pivoted the way that they offer their products, their services, and I think a lot of businesses are really having to be really inventive, during these times. So if you were running a shop or a restaurant and you needed people to physically walk in there and you can no longer be open, have we got some good examples of brands that are having to, that have had to adapt during these times and be particularly inventive?
Well, one, as we're at Leeds Digital Festival, I thought I'd go local with my example, which I think is a really interesting one. So Heaney and Mill, their roast dinners.
Yeah.
They're doing delivery roast dinners, but then I saw a post from them the other day that said on Easter weekend they did 500 deliveries.
Wow.
And I was just thinking, surely that is more, they can't have about 30 covers in their restaurant? They can't get through that many on a normal Sunday. They must, I'm fingers crossed they keep it going on after this, but I was just thinking about behaviours and thinking, God, I hope they keep that sticking.
Well, and I know we're at Leeds Digital Festival, but this has been the only time that I've ever wished I lived in New York, because Tommy Banks and Roots restaurant, which is high-end restaurant, has been doing a kind of set meal delivery service all the way through this. So we had a question from Harriet. Hi, Harriet. So I think you've got good examples in what Tommy Banks is doing, and then, you know, Heaney Mills ain't no Tommy Banks, but they're doing a fantastic job of doing a similar thing.
Yeah.
And do you think the changes that we're seeing, do you think a lot of these will stick, like you said, Becca? You know,
that's what I was
some
thinking.
Businesses are booming more because of the way that they've
Exactly.
sort of changed how they do business.
I was about to say, I was thinking I don't understand commercially how that can't be better for them, really, because they're selling it for the same cost that they were doing in the restaurant. I suppose that, you know, they're probably not making as much on booze and markup of wine and things like that. But 500 is an extraordinary amount to deliver a Sunday roast one weekend.
And we were just talking earlier about whether all the restaurants will flip over, because it might be going to go on for a bit longer than they thought. And like Iberica in Leeds has just gone on to delivery.
I saw that,
buy not only their cooked food, but also all their deli products as well. So I can't see why some of this stuff wouldn't stick. Because it's giving people what they want, and it's just you couldn't get it before, so you can't say people didn't know that they wanted it, you just couldn't get it.
So if a lot of that's going to stick, then, so how, you know, overall then, how do we think this is going to, you know, affect the experience of brands in the future?
One of the things that we've been doing, so we've got obviously the most of our offering is e-commerce, but we did have a shop. We still do have the shop. Hopefully we can reopen in the Victoria Quarter in Leeds. And we were just about to open a design consultation service. So our interior staff can sit down with customers and go through having a look at their space and how to decorate it, giving them tips and tricks. And then obviously all this happened. We closed the store pretty quickly and thought, okay, right, well, what do we do with these people? Can we still offer this service that we really wanted to offer? So we've been taking that virtually now. So the team have been working really hard to change that so that we can offer Zoom appointments. And actually, it's a brilliant idea. We wouldn't have thought of that otherwise, or we probably would have thought of it, but it would probably taken us longer to get there. But actually, we can talk to people nationally because most of our customers are in Greater London. So we're going to get a lot more exposure from that. And actually, people can take their laptop around their room and show us in real time. So actually, it might work better. So I think that's something that's going to stick with us, so that we're going to, you know, make a change because of the price.
I mean, just looking at agencies, I mean, we've all worked in agencies all our lives. The amount of time and discussions and debate that it would have taken to agree to do a webinar, whereas now we're deciding it, we're designing the slides, we're pulling it together.
Yeah, it's
and isn't it amazing how quickly you can turn stuff around when the world has changed? So the world's changed, but maybe our brains are a lot more adaptable than we ever realised.
I think it's stopping us from overthinking.
Probably.
But I think it is a bit of a debate point, isn't it? Because we were talking about it, and I know me and Ali in particular are big fans of Mark Ritson, who believes that actually none of this behaviour is going to stick, and we're going to have a 2-week period after this where everyone will be like, oh my God, we're all working from home and no one needs to go to a supermarket, we'll just get it delivered. And actually, what's going to happen is after that, we'll just go back to exactly how we were, because it has taken thousands of years for our cognitive systems to develop, and we do things in the best way for a human. But then I'm really torn with it, because part of me goes, I completely get that, that's very logical, but then part of me thinks, this is so different to anything that we've ever been through before, how can it not change? So I don't really have I don't have a definitive answer on that one. I think I just completely...
We shall see.
We shall see. History says things will stick. Mark Ritson doesn't, but what does he know?
History proves you that things won't.
Okay. Any other points before we move on to the next section?
I think we should move on to the next section. Andrew needs to unmute himself. Oh, here he is.
There we go. So we'll get creative now. So Andrew's going to talk about different ways that brands have responded creatively, and how we can learn from that.
Yeah, we got a couple of questions before we started around what sort of tone of voice should you adopt when you're trying to sell in this kind of lockdown environment? around sensitivities, and one even saying, I'm delivering training services and people are expecting that I should be doing it for free. Mm-hmm. I think in what we've been saying so far, it's kind of becoming clear that it depends. The answer is it depends. It depends who you are. It depends what your issues are and responsibilities. And I think that a lot of businesses, even similar ones, are finding that they either find themselves that they're in a position of having responsibilities that they need to communicate and they need to adapt to, or it's hit them really hard and they've got to do some damage limitation. You know, if you only have your high street store or high street venues and you've gone from whatever your turnover's been to zero in a matter of days, how do you make sure your customers come back, especially as we were talking earlier about if even when they lift the lockdown, will people still be wary about going to bars, restaurants, etc. And then kind of are there any opportunities, and what are the chances to pick up on opportunities? What opportunities should I take? And also that a curious one that as time goes on, obviously we know what's happened before, but it's even quite difficult now to put ourselves back 5 weeks ago and remember what it was like not really knowing that what was going to happen and what was going to change and how, and let alone to the kind of second week of March or the first week of March, where is that about 5 weeks ago, where we kind of lockdown seemed like something that only happened in Italy or China. And so I've just kind of brought together a few different creative responses that have different tones of voice that kind of go through how different companies have reacted to this, really depending on who they are. So if we go on, and again, the first one is this kind of, you know, the last almost 10 years of the social media experiment, if you like, brought forward this idea of reactive marketing and kind of getting your message out really quickly. And I think that a lot of companies who've been doing that almost now have a bit of a knee-jerk reaction that they've got to say something. You have to say something. It's like a form of marketing Tourette's. And a lot of companies came out with these kind of messages of kind of trying to be helpful, trying to spread the word about what you should be and what you should do and how you should act during COVID-19. And this kind of typographical trick of separating bits apart was very, very common. I mean, for me, these two examples are totally awkward. What's going on that Coca-Cola billboard where you've got the Coca-Cola logo, which then you have a completely different Coca-Cola logo underneath. And if there was one smooth, flowing, connected logo in the whole of the world that looks really weird, pulled apart, it's kind of that. Same with the McDonald's. Like, if this is an attempt to try and support the situation and help and tell people what to do, then them golden arches aren't far enough apart, mate. You know what I mean? You kind of you wonder whether in trying to help, actually you're just taking up a share of voice over something that is at worst irrelevant and at best irrelevant and at worst kind of misinformative. Mm-hmm. Is there an example of companies doing it well? There is a video going about that is all COVID-19 advertising is the same, and it just goes through. It all starts with empty streets and slow piano music, and then kind of somebody seriously says, "In these troubling times," and just kind of goes to show that it does all look the same, and nobody's getting any differentiation in their COVID-19 advertising, how many emails have you had that have the title "Our Response to COVID-19," and how many of them could you tell me who sent them to you? So I couldn't.
CEO.
Yeah, the CEO.
The heartfelt response.
And yet this one from Facebook, somebody at Facebook, some genius at Facebook just went, I've got a mental block on the name. You know that Kate Tempest song? And Kate Tempest put this track out last September called Faces. And I don't know if you're a fan or not, but if you're a fan, if you heard that when she put it out, it's difficult to listen to without welling up and wanting to phone your mum. I'm getting a bit teary now.
No, don't play it.
And I've just put the and so Facebook have effectively made the ultimate COVID-19 ad, and in that kind of genius move, it's all about faces. So it's all about Facebook, and it's all about Portal and WhatsApp, and you know, we were saying earlier, social media is really important. Well, it's really come into its own at this time. Same as being able, just where technology had got to already, we've been able to pick up and just use Teams and all that kind of stuff. But certainly for huge chunks of society all over the world, the fact that if your mum lives alone and is in isolation, she can still talk to the kids, and all that is kind of just so true. I just put the words that they used at the start of this ad down the side, but it's like Kate Tempest, some sort of visionary, and knew what was going to happen, or maybe humans were always going to do this to ourselves or something. But worth rooting out and having a look at if you've not seen it. So I kind of think that was really well done, Reactive. Unfortunate timing. So KFC, who've been, advertising on point over the last 18 months or so, had just come out with this "It's Good" campaign that showed somebody licking the fingers, and it's not good. It's in no way good. If the distancing ads were supposed to help, then how could you possibly put out a billboard that showed people touching the face all over the place with "It's Good" written all over it? KFC did the right thing,
though, aren't they?
Pardon?
They're used to a good crisis, not having enough chicken this time.
An interesting
catch a break,
because they're a company that had to shut a load of venues, didn't they? KFC pulled all this advertising. I don't think there was any saving it.
No.
Really, there's not much you could do. I mean, all other companies, there was cruise companies who got into trouble for advertising cruises, just as everybody was telling people to definitely not go. I mean, the whole cruise thing kind of feels like it kicked off. Saw the Steel advert on telly the other day. Again, we've already said, what are people doing? The weather's beautiful. Everybody's locked at home. If you've got a garden, you're sat in it. If you've got some gin, you're drinking it. The Steel advert is just a kind of, it's like Steel does Lurpak. It's a glorious celebration of sorting out your garden at this time of year, and there's bits flying everywhere, and it's just very exciting, and kind of, it's still totally relevant. Of course, you want to know that the products exist. Of course, you'll go and look at them. And there's kind of not really any need to reference the lockdown, to reference COVID-19. It's not insensitive in any way to talk about chainsaws at a time when it's summer and people are sat in the gardens. So I think some of those questions around sensitivity and tone of voice are a bit, it depends. If you're KFC and you've got people touching the face and it's good, the right thing to do is not to say it. If you're Steel and you're saying the right thing at the right time anyway, and it's not hurting anyone, then you don't need to change what you're saying. I almost, and I didn't, but I almost put some computer games adverts in this bit as well to say, because I think industries like that are really interesting because you don't have to change any of your behavior. If I want to play Doom Eternal, I do what you would normally have done, which is download it, sit and play it at home by yourself. There's some things actually where there's zero behavior change at all. Mm-hmm. But then probably the most interesting kind of group and collection of group are those campaigns or companies that had to reposition or rethink what they were doing. Obviously, somebody like Tesco, they've also got loads of responsibility. So all the supermarkets are putting out adverts about what you have to do when you get to the supermarket and how to social distance in the supermarket and all that kind of stuff. But they also kind of took the opportunity, and this is a bit like what you're saying about putting these, just doing things, putting things together really quickly. And for me, like the food love stories stuff is fine, and it's kind of it's worked ongoing, and it's been a good vehicle for getting loads of brands in under the Tesco brand when you're talking to people. But actually, this seems to have made it completely come into its own. And this idea that people are, it might be Gran's OT biscuits recipe that would normally have been Gran with her OT biscuits recipe, but actually it's the granddaughter who's taken Gran's OT biscuits recipe and she's making them at home. Or, it's made sense of food love stories because of that connection between the food and the people that you love, and filmed with a load of home footage and just put together, and it feels like the most genuine version actually of those Tesco's ads that I've seen. Ditto the nationwide, the kind of Marmite. Oh, go back.
You don't.
Your next one.
Jill.
Smooth.
Ditto the nationwide ads, which I know are complete Marmite for a lot of people. I think that's to do with poetry. There's a lot of people don't like it all. I like it when it's good, and so
her one who's on the screen at the moment is good.
You what? Sorry.
I was about to say I like the woman that you've got on screen. I think her one's good, but I'm not sure about the other ones.
Some are definitely better than others.
Apologies if there's anyone from Nationwide in the webinar.
There's the one on the BBC at the moment, read by Christopher Eccleston, which is supposed to be all patriotic and heartwarming. Just makes me turn the TV off. I hate it. I just think it. They've got some Vogue on to write the poetry, and it's just shocking. However, when it's done well, it works really well. And this kind of arguably that nationwide campaign had probably run its course, but it's fired it up, and it's really kind of made sense of it again. The fact that it's filmed by the person who is talking, the fact that advertisers are really hands off with it, it all just comes together really well. I don't know the story of the Cathedral Cheese advert, which is a #StayHome one. But it feels like they'd already made this advert about being at home and cooking at home and cheese being warm and comforting and a kind of homey thing. And we're just about to finish it and go out with it when the entire world changed, and they probably had an advert full of people hugging people and going around to the Nan's house for dinner and everything. Like I say, I don't know whether any of this is true, but I kind of imagine them going, "What are we going to do?" Right, and rushing out and just filming the empty streets, getting that back together in a kind of #StayHome thing, which borders on that kind of patronizing brands telling you what to do thing, but they just about get away with it. And I think if they have had to reposition and rethink what they were slap bang in the middle of, they've not done a bad job there.
So I think I think there's some really interesting stuff going on, and some of it. So this stuff about production and doing things on the cheap. I mean, are we going to? Our brand's going to get addicted to filming their ads on iPhones and editing them in the bedroom?
I think it was always, it's been the case for a while that everything's getting easier, everything's getting cheaper. If you can make the Channel 4 did their 24 hours in coronavirus Britain, filmed on Friday the 3rd, edited over the weekend and then broadcast on Monday. If you can put together an hour-long show like that, and I'm not saying it wasn't hard work for people, I'm sure it was, but then the ability, you don't really need to go down to your Soho editing suite. You can edit broadcast quality things on a laptop at home these days. The cameras are great. So for me, a lot of what it's been coming round to is who should talk, what sort of tone of voice should we have, what should we say? It kind of comes back to being authentic, to being relevant. And if you can do things quickly, why aren't you making more stuff that is more authentic and more
I think all the good examples that you see at the moment are about being authentic, about being relevant. So be it a local brand suddenly popping up saying we're going to do this, be it a global brand, but they suddenly they already had the right tone of voice. They already had the right thing going on. And so the best examples are where people were already in tune with audiences. And the worst examples are where people have suddenly done a backflip and tried to adopt a tone of voice that just doesn't fit. And I think some of the weirdest ones are things like Coca-Cola, where their brand identity is all about kind of living life and all the rest of it. Why they don't just adopt a positive tone of voice at the moment? There's nothing wrong with being positive. People still are eating things, drinking things, spending time with their friends, and even if they're spending time with their family on Zoom. Sorry, Ali.
Nike's a good example of doing that, of having that positive tone of voice, but not flipping too much. I think they've done it a lot better than Coca-Cola and McDonald's.
And just sort of a way, as well as tone of voice, do you think there's going to be a lot of brands that go even further and completely evolve or change their propositions and what they stand for coming out of this?
I hope not. I just because I think that won't. Coming back to exactly what you've been saying, that's not genuine, it's not authentic. I think if your entire business has changed, sure, you need a new brand proposition or you need a new brand purpose.
It's almost highlighting an issue with the proposition in the first place, that it's not authentic and true to you.
You don't think there's a chance
needs have completely changed, then sure. But if those two things haven't happened, no, your brand proposition shouldn't fundamentally change.
Do you think that with a kind of renewed focus on being useful and helpful and a positive force in society, brand purpose might kind of be back on the table?
I really hope not.
Hasn't this been the ultimate test, the ultimate acid test of brand purpose, where you've seen brands that have said, we're all about the environment, we're all about helping people, and you go, right, you just laid off all your workers, you're not paying any of them. Do you know what I mean? So I think this is almost like the culmination of, should brands be thinking about that or not? So hopefully, well, not hopefully, but maybe we'll just go back into an era of old school advertising.
I think brands should definitely do more for the environment, for society as a whole. But I think that let's not confuse that with that being the core purpose for why they are there. As soon as they start to kind of go, well, our core purpose is just to make people's lives absolutely amazing. No, it's not. You're there to sell things, to be honest. Completely agree.
Okay, I think
the message there is not very much changes then, according to Ali.
No, that's not true. I just have a problem with pivoting so that's your entire purpose when it's not.
I agree.
Brands have to be authentic, and you can do good in the world while still maintaining a good brand positioning and purpose for your your brand.
And then just one comment I wanted to make on Andrew's Andrew's slides where he was talking about Coca-Cola and McDonald's kind of almost knee-jerking, feeling like they've got to say something about COVID-19. So I think what I'm reading a lot about in the industry at the moment is brands feeling like they need to change their comms at the moment because they're worried that it's not going to resonate. And I think one of the useful articles that I read was another one from Thinkbox that said that they've been redoing some testing of ads, looking at the results pre-COVID-19 and actually looking at the same ads and consumer sentiment there, and there's been hardly any change. So I think it's a point to say as well that you don't need to change your comms, you don't necessarily need to reference what's going on. Actually, it can still be impactful.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I think in terms of time, we're going to have to wrap up there. Hopefully everybody that attended today has found that insightful. As I said, I'm going to try and get around as many people as I can after this session and just see if there's any questions that we didn't manage to get onto and try and answer as many of those that I can. We'll put the podcast up on the Mediaworks website. So if if there's members of your team, for example, that couldn't join today that want to have a listen, feel free to go on there. And if I don't manage to get to you, I didn't expect this many people to attend today, then also feel free to send an email to info@mediaworks.co.uk, and again, we'll try and get back with answers to your questions. So thank you, enjoy the rest of your weeks, and take care.